Robbins Barstow was a lifelong, passionate advocate for whales. During the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, he produced a series of documentary films about the plight of whales and the global movement to save them.
Baja California is an 800-mile-long peninsula extending along the southwest corner of the North American continent. It is part of the country of Mexico, separated from the mainland by a branch of the Pacific Ocean known both as the Sea of Cortez and the Gulf of California. The usual starting point for trips to the Baja Peninsula is the California city of San Diego, located on the Pacific Ocean at the southern end of the state, just north of the Mexican border. Here is where our journey begins. This is Robbins Barstow of Wethersfield, Connecticut, USA, inviting you to share with me a 2-week cruise to one of the most fabulous land and water wildlife areas in the whole world, the Baja Peninsula and the Sea of Cortez. The western borderline between Mexico and the United States is at the top of the Baja Peninsula, where the head of the Gulf is less than 100 miles from California and Arizona. The peninsula's irregular coastline embraces large bays and lagoons and many islands, large and small. Our starting point is San Diego, California, USA, where on Friday, January 10th, 1986, some 60 travel adventurers from all over the United States are boarding the 143-foot cruise ship Pacific Northwest Explorer. This boat is going to be our home for the next 14 days. The captain of our vessel is Kevin Hill, an experienced and skillful navigator whose challenge will be to bring the ship as close as possible to the marine mammals we see without disturbing or harassing them. The expedition leader is a young man named Peter Butz, who has been taking voyages out among the great whales around Baja California for 6 years under the auspices of Sven Olaf Lindblad's Special Expeditions Global Travel Agency. Day 1 is sunny and cool, and the blue water in the bay seems to invite us to depart without delay. Shortly after noon, the passengers walk up the gangplank from the dock onto the ship and search out the cabins below decks where they will be bunking for the coming 2 weeks. At about 3 p.m., the boat leaves the dock and heads out into the harbor of San Diego Bay. As the city skyline looms behind us, we encounter our first wildlife. Some sea lions are sunning themselves on a harbor buoy as we pass. San Diego is a major United States naval port, and we see a number of warships anchored in the bay. They had warned us about giant mosquitoes, though we didn't really think they'd be this big, so we were relieved to have this flotilla turn out to be just a line of Navy helicopters flying by. On days such as this, there are many sailing boats out on the bay. San Diego is also a shipbuilding base, and they happen to be launching a new submarine on this particular day as we are heading out from the harbor. San Diego Bay is shielded from the Pacific Ocean by a large rocky promontory, which is known as Point Loma. This is a favorite land-based site from which to look for whales as they pass down the coast. As we head out through the broad mouth of the bay, with the city disappearing behind us, we get a good view of Point Loma. Then out on the open sea, the ship shifts into cruising speed and we head south along the coast, very shortly crossing over into Mexican waters. At this point, all hands gather along the ship's railings, straining our eyes to see who may be the first to sight a broad gray back in the water. There, or a white spout of spray. There, bringing us into the eagerly awaited company of great whales. There's always a special excitement about seeing the first whales on any whale-watching trip. And here we are on our very first afternoon, enjoying the thrill of seeing at first just the backs and the spouts, and then the beautiful arc of a triangular tail rising up out of the ocean, pointing to the sky and then disappearing into the sea as the whale dives. With this foretaste of what lies ahead, we are both excited and content as we view our first striking sunset over the ocean. The second day of our journey we spend entirely at sea, heading steadily south along the Baja coast. But what a wondrous day this is to be of close encounters of the cetacean kind. We find ourselves right in the midst of migrating gray whales, all heading in the same direction that we are, aiming for the warm and shallow lagoons on the peninsula's west side. As we watch the whales surface, usually in small groups, we hear the explosive whoosh of their spouting as they expel the stale, warm air from their huge lungs and then inhale fresh air to sustain them while they continue their journey underwater. When the grays surface, they generally blow 3 to 5 times in rapid succession and then dive with their tail flukes raised into the air as they descend to a lower depth where they remain for 8 or 10 minutes before rising to the surface to breathe again. Water covering the surface of the twin blowholes on the tops of their heads accounts for the spray-like whiteness of their spout as the expelled air condenses in the cooler atmosphere at the surface. We are not really prepared for our next encounter, one of the most thrilling and magnificent spectacles of nature to be seen any place on Earth. Over on the horizon we see a wide, dark band with intermittent flashes of sunlight. As we watch in awestruck wonder, we see this incredible mass of shining bodies come rushing toward our ship. Suddenly, we realize that these leaping swimmers are dolphins, literally hundreds and hundreds of them, converging in a crowd stretching as far as the eye can see. From the colorful markings on their sides, we can see that this is a species of dolphin known as the common dolphin. Herman Melville describes these dolphins by saying, "They always swim in hilarious shoals, which upon the sea keep tossing themselves to heaven, like caps in a 4th of July crowd." Common dolphins are found in the temperate waters of all oceans, and they often travel in incredibly large herds, which can number as many as 3,000. These dolphins seem to love mass visits to passing boats. They all dash over and will spend many minutes frolicking around and under the ship, apparently taking turns with their favorite sport of riding the bow waves. They have a pointed triangular dorsal fin and a dark V-shaped patch on their side, which gives them the nickname of saddleback. We are absolutely enthralled by this fantastic sight. We could watch their graceful forms and spirited antics all afternoon, but suddenly All at once, as if on cue, the entire herd turns tail and heads off en masse away from the ship to some other destination. But what a peak of joy they have given us, at the same time that they clearly seem to be enjoying themselves in our company. This truly is what we mean when we speak of the relationship between humans and cetaceans as being one of mutual enrichment. Cetacean is the scientific name for all whales, dolphins, and porpoises. There are some 80 different species of cetaceans in the world, 10 of which are considered to be great whales, like these California gray whales which we are again following here. The remaining species of cetaceans are smaller whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Our fantastically dramatic afternoon continues now with a remarkable sighting of a closely bunched group of 7 large gray whales, all surfacing together off our bow, and then in succession raising their tails and diving. We have to call this group the Magnificent Seven, and we marvel at this superb view of their massive 45-foot bodies as they pursue their common course. This wonderful second day of our voyage ends with a close encounter with another species of dolphin, the Pacific white-sided dolphin. As they swim alongside our boat and position themselves to ride the bow waves, they appear equally graceful but less frolicsome than the common dolphins. Far fewer in number, they glide peacefully beneath the surface, propelled by the up and down motion of their exquisite, flat, horizontal tails. We are favored with a sea so calm and mirror-like that we can see the reflection of the ship's bow as we watch the streamlined bodies flow smoothly through the water. A special guest aboard this voyage of the Pacific Northwest Explorer is the outstanding British wildlife artist Keith Shackleton. Before going inside for supper, he and I reviewed the day's highlights.
Well, Keith, I think we've had a fantastic day today.
Unbelievably good, wasn't it? The dolphins?
Oh, all of those dolphins coming so close
I've
and
never
coming over to
seen
see
it.
us.
Never seen it as well as that.
And then those Magnificent Seven grays coming up all at the same time, so close.
All the flukes.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you.
And so ends day 2. By this time, we have traveled nearly halfway down the west coast of the Baja Peninsula. But before continuing around the Elbow Point, we are going to make a side excursion to the largest of a group of offshore islands known as the San Benito Islands. A glorious sunrise greets us on the morning of our 3rd day, and as we watch a seabird herald the dawn, we find our ship anchored in the middle of 3 low-lying barren islands, the San Benitos. As the early morning darkness begins to lighten after breakfast inside the cabin, we feel a sense of heightened excitement. Scanning the horizon, we see that at the end of a small inlet on the largest of these islands, there appears to be some kind of small human settlement. Today is the first time that we will use the Humbers, small inflatable rubber boats like Zodiacs with outboard motors. There are 5 of them stacked on the deck, and we will soon become accustomed to having them swung out and lowered over the side into the water when we are leaving the main ship for some special onshore or on the surface activity. We board the Humbers from a stairwell and a small water-level platform at the stern of the ship. Each Humber can hold a total of 8 people, 7 passengers sitting along the sides, and a staff member handling the outboard motor in the rear. It generally takes 2 trips by each Humber to get everybody transported in turns from ship to shore. The tour leader, Peter Butts, is operator of our Humber, and he warns us that when we get to the beach, we may have to do a little wading to get up above the waterline. The settlement where we are landing is a small fishing village inhabited for at least part of the year by a few Mexican fishing families who eke out a precarious existence catching fish and lobsters and collecting abalone shells. This sheltered cove offers a relatively calm place for members of our group to disembark. The beach is covered by small stones and brightly colored abalone shells whose pearl-like luster sparkles luminously in the early morning sunlight, as displayed by this welcoming Mexican boy. The villagers respond in friendly fashion to our informal greetings of Buenos Dias as we pass along among the simple dwelling places. We divide into two groups and set out to explore on foot this desert-like island washed by ocean breakers. It is most famous as a breeding ground for elephant seals, and we soon come upon a female with her black-skinned, newly born calf. The famous 19th century whaler Charles Scammon wrote that among the varieties of marine mammals which periodically resort to the land, no one attains such a gigantic proportion as the sea elephant. It is the male or bull elephant seal which grows to such prodigious size and gives the species its name. It reaches up to 16 feet in length and can weigh as much as 3 or 4 tons. The proboscis of the adult male is a unique appendage resembling in appearance a foreshortened elephant's trunk. The male inflates this monstrous nose to make loud honking sounds which appear to be related to mating and to fighting with other males for dominance. At one end of the island, we find an elephant seal nursery on a narrow beach crowded with mothers and newborn calves. We're almost deafened by the constant cacophony of cries from hungry pups and nursing mothers as they jostle for position. Seals like these can only move on land by undulating, hunching their bodies along. In another part of the island, in the water beside some high rocks, we find a big bull raising his inflated nose to make a challenging, honking sound. Then we see 2 bulls fighting each other in the surf, slashing their teeth against each other's throat. This kind of male combat occurs frequently, as the bulls vie for lordship over a mating harem of females. This wide-eyed female is one of a dozen or so cows kept to himself by this self-satisfied bull. At least temporarily, his rivals seem to have been conquered, and he can lazily oversee his flock of females from this rocky throne. On the way back to our landing beach, we climb a hill overlooking the bay and get a fine view of the 3 San Benito islands, grouped triangularly around the open anchorage in the middle, where we can see our boat in the distance waiting for our return. After the excitement of this first land excursion, it is nice to just relax, looking out over the ship's rail as we now continue our journey southward. Our next destination is to be San Ignacio Lagoon, one of the famous Baja gray whale calving and mating grounds. The waters of these large Mexican lagoons, even in midwinter, are comparatively warm and shallow, and they provide an ideal protective setting for gray whale mothers to bear their calves and then nurse and nurture them for several months. The sunrise on day 4 is heavily overcast, but our spirits are raised by a pair of pelicans as they fly by, alternately flapping and gliding just inches above the surface of the sea. There are several young naturalists aboard, keeping track of all wildlife encountered, whether bird, fish, or mammal, and enriching our travel experience with informative observations about nature's incredible variety of wonders. Before reaching the lagoon, we are again treated to a soul-stirring visit by a group of dolphins. It is endlessly fascinating to lean over the bow rail and watch their sleek and graceful bodies effortlessly coasting along on the underwater waves created by the ship's prow pushing the sea along out in front of it. One member of our party prides herself on the array of patches on her jacket, attesting to the variety of other nature cruises she has already been on. When we do arrive at San Ignacio Lagoon, we again take turns going out in the small humbers while our special expedition's mother ship, the Pacific Northwest Explorer, remains anchored in the middle of the shallow bay. From the surface of the somewhat choppy sea, the ship looms like a giant above us. But our mission today is to search for living underwater giants, and the humbers fan out in different directions to see who will be the first to spot a spout and see a whale. Actually, our first cetacean encounter turns out to be a pod of Pacific bottlenose dolphins. These dolphins, the kind that Flipper was and that many marine parks display in captivity, are quite large with tall, sharply curved dorsal fins. They can reach 10 or 12 feet in length. Here in the wild, they swim slowly and deliberately among our little boats, as if aware and appreciative of our peaceful intent. Suddenly, we see a large spout, and we realize that now we are also in the company of a great whale. And look how close the big, long back is to the people in that humber. Seeing whales up close like this from the surface of the water is a mind-blowing experience. And look sharply here, because now we have found and are following a giant gray whale mother accompanied by a brand new baby bobbing to the surface just to the left of her. We can see the mother underwater raising her great broad back to the surface, and then to the left the black-skinned baby comes up for a quick breath also. What a breathtaking sight this is for those of us trailing them in our little humber. A gray whale can grow up to 45 or 50 feet in length, 4 or 5 times the length of our small rubber boat, and may weigh as much as 35 tons. Even a baby is 15 feet long at birth. For nearly a year, it depends on its mother for milk, nursing underwater. Occasionally in this lagoon, gray whales known as friendlies will of their own accord come right up alongside one of the small rubber boats and allow themselves actually to be touched and stroked by human hands. This did not happen to us, but as the humbers return their passengers to the mother ship, we feel deeply gratified at having been privileged to share such close space with so many of these magnificent water wonders. That afternoon, as we continue our journey southward from San Ignacio Lagoon, we witness another spectacular water wonder. Have you ever seen a dolphin surfing? Here they are, having great sport, leaping through the waves created by our ship's plowing bow and coasting down the slopes of the water hills. This is dolphin body surfing, and it's as thrilling for us to watch as it must be for them to play. So much has been happening in just these first 4 days of our trip that it really feels good just to relax and spend a little time before dusk contemplating the contrasting offerings of a coastal sea voyage. In calm and peaceful moments of solitude and silence, looking out over the deep surrounding waters, we thank God for His infinite creation, and at the same time for the special blessings of interacting with other wondrous creatures in His living world. A fitting ending to this day of many marvels is provided by the glory of a brightly colored sun setting in the west directly over the Pacific Ocean. There's something special about a sunset at sea, with a golden orb dropping below the watery horizon and appearing to disappear into the extinguishing wetness of the ocean itself. During the night, our ship continues to move southward toward another of Baja California's fabled lagoons, Baja Magdalena, which is shielded from the ocean by a long, uninhabited desert island with open sea entrances to the bay at both north and south ends. As we arise in the morning of the 5th day, we see that we have passed through the southern opening to the lagoon and are approaching the dock at a small Mexican fishing port on the mainland opposite Magdalena Island. This is our trip's port of entry to Mexico, and the staff handles our passports and other papers as we pass informally through the local customs station. We're docked alongside a variety of fishing vessels, some very old, and there appears to be a substantial resident population of pelicans, parked alone and in groups all over the place. Pelicans have an awkward look when perched on some stationary object, but when they take to the air, they can be surprisingly graceful. Leaving the dock with its colorful assortment of vessels, our group enjoys a leisurely stroll through the small town. Our walk is observed by a high-soaring frigate bird, whose elegant grace and sharp-angled beauty stand out strikingly against the blue sky. The name of the town we are visiting is San Carlos. It's the port for a major agricultural area, and for the most part it is a well-kept little community with homes and schools, storage plants, and fields. On the outskirts of town, we are shown an extremely rare ground-crawling cactus plant.
This is the creeping devil cactus, and this is one of the few places in Baja where it still occurs. Most of its natural habitat has been destroyed by cultivation.
Along the beach, away from the dock, we observe many birds, including a large flock of marbled godwits, long-beaked and long-legged shore feeders, looking like overgrown sandpipers. We also pass pieces of fish hung out to dry in the sun. Back on our ship for more water wandering, we move through one of the favorite calving grounds of the gray whales, the Hull Canal, the sometimes narrow passageway between the long Magdalena Island and the Baja mainland. The weather is calm and sunny, enabling us to view with awe the green mangrove trees which provide the backdrop for an occasional whale sighting, and then the Sahara-like sand dunes which form the major part of this deserted desert island separating us from the ocean. Again we are uplifted by the magnificent sight of frigate birds floating against the sky. When we reach the north end of Magdalena Island, at the mouth of one of the entrances from the ocean to the bay, our ship drops anchor for the night. Here the sun sets behind the island's wind-carved dunes at what is called Boca de Soledad. The morning of day 6 is shrouded in mist, but that does not prevent us from going ashore in the Humbers to explore the tantalizing sand dunes, on which we cannot help but leave footprints anywhere we wander. There is not much vegetation on this elongated mass of sandy hills, surrounded on all sides by the blue of the sea. It presents an unusual vista, far removed from the accustomed urban habitats of civilization. It is fun to try to climb barefoot up the shifting slopes and to look down at our boat anchored on the sheltered side. On the ocean side, we can hear the breakers roar. We can understand why the whales, at the end of their long journey, welcome wending their way through this surf-filled entrance mouth into the calmer waters of the lagoon beyond. And it is in this peaceful lagoon on the eastern side of the island that we once again venture out close to the surface in our rubber humbers, watching for the whales. See how many tails you can count during this afternoon's encounters, as they arch their backs and dive down beneath the surface. It is frequently possible to distinguish individual whales by the markings and colorization on the undersides of their tails. This is often how we recognize seeing the same whale more than once. After a couple of hours of renewed small boat excursions, we are summoned back to the mothership for a return cruise back down through the Hull Canal. Here we can look down from the deck as we pass by mothers and calves, some of them so newly born that they are just learning how to surface and to breathe and to dive. Sometimes the calf surfaces first, sometimes the mother, but they are almost constantly touching each other. The California gray whale holds the record for the longest annual migration of any mammal in the world. They spend the summer months feeding in the cool, nutrient-rich waters of the Arctic and the Bering Sea off Alaska. Then in the fall, they begin the long 6,000-mile swim down along the entire western coast of the North American continent to Baja California. The great parade reaches these lagoons in December and January, and here the females give birth to the calves conceived a year earlier. This very young calf appears to be experiencing some difficulty in coordinating its movements and learning how to breathe and dive properly. Its mother is close by, but it spends an unusual amount of time thrashing around on the surface by itself. We trust that with its mother's patient help, it will soon become properly oriented to being an air-breathing mammal living in the sea. I talked with our leader, Peter Butz, about what we have been seeing here.
This is my first time in these lagoons here, but you've been here before. How would you compare what we've seen the last 2 days with what you've seen in previous times?
Well, we've been coming in here for 6 years now, and we've been down in these lagoons earlier than this. We've been down here as early as December, and on none of the trips have we seen so many very young calves as we've seen on this trip. Obviously very newborn. Other years we've seemed to have seen more that have been several weeks old, but never so many that were so small as what we've seen these last couple of days.
Those little small heads alongside the great big bodies. Good, thank you.
You bet.
At the close of this day, we head out from Magdalena Bay and resume our journey southward toward the tip of the Baja Peninsula. The boat moves steadily on throughout the night. We are now on the last leg of the long ocean cruise down the west coast, and by nightfall we hope to reach and round the rocky land's end known as Cabo San Lucas. This will be the southernmost point in our circumnavigation of the great Baja Peninsula. To help keep track of the time frame for our varied adventures and to maintain a cinematic log of our voyage, every morning before breakfast I go out on the bow and temporarily mount a date sign to be filmed for the movie record. We are now starting our 7th day, and as we proceed down toward the Cape, we have a dramatic encounter with a group of different whales. We observe at least 3 of these giant leviathans surfacing on the deep blue of the ocean. Approaching them more closely, it is apparent that they are not gray whales. From their spouts, their backs, and especially their tails, we can tell that these are Pacific humpback whales. They appear to be slightly larger than their North Atlantic cousins, the acrobatic humpbacks, which are the favorites of New England summer whale watchers. But these Pacific humpbacks don't seem to raise their tails out of the water as frequently when they hump their backs to dive. The humpbacks in the North Pacific are known to travel in an ocean triangle, moving between Alaska, Mexico, and Hawaii at different times of the year. We stay with this group for nearly an hour, waiting to get photos of the undersides of their tails, each with a distinctive pattern of white and black markings by which individuals can be identified. There's a good tail shot at last. By taking and comparing whale tail photos from different locations, naturalists are able to document the travel routes of specific whales. Some humpbacks seen off Baja California have also been photographed in Alaska and Hawaii. Now they are heading toward us. Humpback whales, like the grays, were nearly exterminated by modern whalers during the first half of the 20th century. International protection for the last 50 years has allowed gray whales to recover, and they have now been removed from the endangered species list. Humpback whales, however, remain endangered. While we are still observing these three, we are joined by some dolphins again. As always, it is fascinating and fun to watch them riding our boat's bow waves and swimming so gracefully and effortlessly along parallel to the ship's course, exhibiting a seemingly irrepressible joie de vivre. It's also a thrill to see these dolphins playing in, among, and around their giant cousins, the humpbacks. They have been known to ride whales' bow waves, too. In contrast to the gray whales, whose recovered population now numbers well over 20,000, it is estimated that there are still less than 1,000 humpback whales in the North Pacific. We are sad to finally have to take our leave of these treasured preservers of the species, but we are nearing our land's end destination. A long strip of sandy ocean beach leads up to the stunning outcroppings of rock at the tip of the peninsula. As we approach the Cape, we have one more whale encounter with two large gray whales who have strayed beyond the crowds at the lagoons. They give us an exceptional view of their overall bodies, splotched with the white spots which give this species its distinctive color. The closer we come to this magnificent landmark, Cabo San Lucas, the Cape of St. Luke, the more awestruck we are at the dramatic beauty of these protruding pinnacles of rock which stand guard over the end of the Baja Peninsula. These awesome rock formations, projecting at different points from out of the sea, are among the most photographed pieces of land and seascape any place in the world. As we will observe later, these giant rocks also provide a much-used nighttime resting place for multitudes of foraging seabirds. Favorite photo spots among the rocks are an inland cave and this beautiful natural arch with blue-green water flowing through it. This area is also a favored fishing spot, whether for pelicans or for small boat enthusiasts. On the east side of the peninsula's end is the surprisingly busy commercial and tourist port and harbor of Cabo San Lucas. There are many small boats and yachts in the harbor, and both sport fishing and food fishing are major enterprises. Once again, our landing at a Spanish-speaking port of entry is accompanied by greetings from a large Chamber of Commerce delegation of pelicans. The town itself is a mixture of Americanos and Mexicanos, and we enjoy sampling its various wares while our ship waits anchored in the bay. There is a large luxury hotel up on the ridge overlooking both the harbor on the east and the ocean on the west. It is exhilarating to stop for a drink at the spectacular Whalewatcher's Bar on a stone veranda facing the Pacific. This has to be one of the most dramatic and exotic bar locations in the world, where you can spot spouts as you sip. There are some interesting old buildings down below on the expansive beach, which has gained some fame as a setting for swimsuit photography. Among the towering rocks near the tip, we find one pass-through beach connected to the water on both sides. In the early evening, our boat takes us out again to see the birds flocking in incredible numbers around the sky-reaching rocks of Cabo San Lucas. These are frigate birds, literally hundreds and hundreds of them filling the sky. Unable to land on water, they must return at day's end to find a safe, dry spot on the ledges of this giant rock where they can roost for the night. Our night aboard the ship begins with another glorious ocean sunset in a natural setting which could scarcely be more magnificent. The next morning, with our odyssey now half completed, we wake with the boat tossing and pitching in a heavy sea. Surprisingly, as we head up into the Sea of Cortez, also called the Gulf of California, we find the water much rougher and the waves higher than any we had encountered on the ocean side of the peninsula. The spray from the bow plowing through the large waves splashes the dining room windows and keeps most of the passengers inside for the morning. But this is the kind of outdoor exposure which I, for one, greatly enjoy. You can see the horizon rising and falling as the boat pitches and tosses. For me, it's a fun challenge and a thrill ride to try to keep standing up and not lose my balance out there on the foredeck as the prow plunges up and down in the giant swells. Shortly after lunch, the boat moves into the lee of a large desert island, Isla Partida, with a tranquil bay of contrastingly calm blue-green water, which makes us feel as if we have discovered paradise. Everybody goes ashore in the Humbers, landing like time travelers on a beautiful, smooth, sandy beach, and then setting out to spend the afternoon exploring the cactus-covered hills and gullies of this deserted desert place.
This is a cardone cactus, and you can notice the holes that were made by one of the desert woodpeckers in it.
What a magical vista we have from the side of one hill, overlooking the arroyo and reaching out to embrace the beach, the bay, and the boat. There is something fantastically romantic and exotic about going ashore on a large, uninhabited island in the middle of the Sea of Cortez, and then at night having a big bonfire and barbecue on the beach. We are reluctant when morning comes to depart this sheltered bay of paradise. But our next adventure is to provide an unforgettable natural history experience. Further north, our ship approaches a small fortress-like island of giant rocks known as Los Islotes, which turns out to be the gathering place for a huge colony of California sea lions. They are a deafeningly raucous bunch, barking and roaring as they jostle around on the ledges and dive into the water to mill around next to our boat.
Are we scaring them, or are they just...
The sides of the island are so steep that the captain can nose our ship right up to within a few feet of the rocks. There is one leveled stretch of rocks over to the right, just above the water's surface, where a gang of sea lions are sitting crowded together, stretching their necks and pointing their noses to the sky against a fantastic backdrop of ocean spray from heavy waves crashing against the far side of the rocks. On this sunny ledge, there are a number of bored mother sea lions with small calves nursing or just lying stretched out on their mothers' backs. In the early morning sunlight, the white spray catapulting high in the air behind the sea lion troop makes a breathtaking sight. We have now progressed some distance up into the broad Gulf of California, the Sea of Cortez, separating the Baja Peninsula from the Mexican mainland. It's now time to make a visit to the well-situated city of La Paz, the largest and most important municipality in the southern part of Baja. The city has a population of about 150,000, and true to its name, it is a peaceful center of commerce, tourism, and education. We enjoy an afternoon and evening of shore leave here. On day 10, we continue our journey northward in the Sea of Cortez, looking for additional species of whales, and especially the largest of all, the great blue whale. We do sight a medium-sized pair of smooth-backed rorqual whales with very small dorsal fins, and the naturalists believe they may be the kind known as Brutus whales. This means we have now sighted 6 different species of cetaceans, 3 kinds of dolphins, the gray, humpback, and now Brutus whales, but no blues. While some of us eat lunch out on the deck to make sure we don't miss anything, we next find ourselves in the midst of a large, widely dispersed pod of bottlenose dolphins. Occasionally, 1 or 2 of these dolphins will suddenly leap out of the water as if in sheer exhilaration. Watch closely now to see this. From time to time, some of these bottlenose dolphins venture over to the side of our ship, as if offering us a gift of pure joy at watching their symmetrical bodies propelled by their slowly undulating tails flow through the clear blue water alongside us. This day is Sunday, and it is hard to imagine a more beautiful cathedral or a more inspiring sermon than these dolphins in the Sea of Cortez. In the afternoon, the group decides to make another excursion to a foreign shore, riding the Humbers to the rocky beach of one more of the Gulf's large, cactus-covered, uninhabited islands, Isla Santa Catalina. Here we find, alongside a formation known as Elephant Rock, an ideal place for snorkeling, where we can observe underwater a wide variety of colorful fish before heading back out to the ship for a delicious dinner and an evening lecture by one of the naturalists. The weather the next day is perfect, with the morning sun spreading its warmth over land and sea. Continuing our quest, leaving a wake of white foam behind us, we search the vast surface all morning in vain for any sign of whales, though we know that many, including blues, do frequent these waters.
Well, so far, this beautiful 11th day, Keith, has been one of water, water everywhere, and not a whale in sight.
All right. They got to be somewhere, though, haven't they?
They've got to be somewhere, so we'll keep looking for that
This afternoon?
tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Finally, taking advantage of the low tide, we decide to go ashore and search for smaller forms of life on the island of San Marcos. Here we engage in tide pooling under the guidance of Dr. James Kelly, a tour member who is Dean of Science at San Francisco State University and whose scientific vocabulary is astounding.
This is an example of one of the commonest tide pool urchins in the West Coast, and in the Gulf it's called Strongylocentritus purpuratus. The live animal, purple with the spines on it, and the test.
Okay, this little cone is a wolf spider, and you can see the webbing around the edges of it, and it goes on inside there to his little house. And
never having heard of a wolf spider before, we are intrigued at how this small insect hides inside the little mound it has erected and then pounces out to catch any unwary passerby. We feel well rewarded by this afternoon's extraordinary hands-on course in shore and desert small life. Our trip has now taken us more than halfway up the eastern coast of the Baja Peninsula, and our destination on the morning of the 12th day is to be the incredible bird island of San Pedro Martir. In the dawn's early light, we see ahead of us the great bulk of rock which is home to literally thousands of birds. A single gull flies overhead as we follow a surface-skimming flock of pelicans heading toward the whitewashed mountain peak, resting like a giant iceberg in the middle of the sea. The rays from the rising sun on the eastern horizon color the sky like an artist's palette. Light up the high-flying birds and cast a rosy hue over the island's lustrous sides as we prepare to send a landing party out in the Humbers. For thousands of years, this island has been the continuing nesting place for countless generations of vast numbers of birds whose white-gray excrement, guano, has covered the rocks with accumulated layers, making the slopes as slippery as a greased slide. Our arrival is greeted by large flocks of pelicans, gulls, and booby birds competing for space on the surfside ledges, and by dozens of sea lions cavorting in the water around us. Just getting ashore on Isla San Pedro Martir is a daunting and perilous task, and those of us who risk it know that however carefully we climb, we cannot avoid getting tarred and feathered with the whitish guano before we depart. Back down at Pelican Point, the sea lions seem to be putting on another aquatic performance for us, chasing each other around with acrobatic contortions. Midway up the side of the island, we find a semi-plateau where a number of boobies have established nests and are circling around in the air to protect them. These large, graceful seabirds are blue-footed boobies. I don't know where they got the name booby, but they are called blue-footed because their webbed feet are indeed bright blue. It's difficult to see their feet because they only become visible when the booby comes in for a landing on the ground or on a rock and extends his feet to act as an air brake. Guano, at one time, was harvested on this island for fertilizer, so that at day's end we feel a little bit like pirates guarding a secret treasure. Our whale-watching adventure in Baja California is to come to an end 2/3 of the way up the east coast to a small community located at Bahia de Los Angeles, where we will leave the boat and fly back to San Diego. A new tour group will join the boat here and follow a reverse course in circumnavigating the peninsula. But we still have one more day to look for whales and try to find Big Blue. For one last time, our eyes keep scanning the horizon. Then suddenly, we see a spout shooting high into the air. It is different from any we have seen before. Yes, it's the spout of a blue whale, the largest animal ever to have lived on Earth. Blue whales grow up to 100 feet in length, and the spout from their giant blowholes sends a narrow column of mist higher up in the air than that of any other whale. At long last, our quest has been rewarded dramatically on the last possible day. What excitement runs through the ship as everyone scurries for their cameras. All my life I have dreamed of someday seeing a great blue whale alive in the sea. I have waited over 60 years for this ultimate moment, and now it has arrived. After the whale has replenished its breath for half a dozen times, it points its immense body downward and raises its incredibly long, narrow tail out of the water for a deep dive. After staying down for 10 or 12 minutes, our blue beauty surfaces again. Observing the long, smooth, blue-gray back of this gentle leviathan and the tiny tip of a dorsal fin far back on its body, the naturalists aboard our ship estimate that this lone specimen cruising leisurely along in this Baja waterway is about 70 or 80 feet long. British wildlife artist Keith Shackleton has observed that any superlative is provocative, and almost everything about a blue whale is a superlative. Its tail measures 15 feet from tip to tip, the widest of any living creature. Our captain skillfully maneuvers our boat closer and closer to the whale on each surface without disturbing it. Finally, the whale comes up right alongside the ship and gives us an unsurpassable view. I want to freeze frame this last climactic shot so we can take in the full length of this tremendous underwater form, from the spouting head way up front to the widespread tail flukes back at the rear. What a living monument to the incomparable glory of God's miraculous creation.
More of Robbins Barstow's whale documentaries are available on the BTA Films channel on YouTube. Click here to subscribe or follow these links to other films by a master of home movie storytelling in the pre-digital era.